Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the World Wrestling Federation developed a little bit of an attitude. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Yokozuna doesn't wear shoes.
They got me with that. Joe Giammatteo.
I can't wait to be alone with you and Zebekiah.
Oh, man, that's good. I'm glad you went with that. I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history one episode of Raw at a time. But first, we had mail call come in here. Gentlemen, I wanted to just bring this to your attention. Lord Thomas, the luckiest bastard in all of England, has emailed us. For those of you out there that are longtime listeners, Tom was the winner of our one and only contest giveaway in what was probably the single greatest podcast gift giveaway of all time. Everything went very smoothly for it, and it was the best. We have the best podcast giveaways here. But anyway, Tom wrote in and says to us, "Hi guys, I've loved seeing how much Steve Austin was such a great seller and performer before his injury." And I just wanted to agree with that right off the bat. It's been a really crazy comparison to see where he's at now in our viewing as opposed to where he winds up post-injury.
We've talked about that a few times here too, is, you know, when he first started out as the ringmaster and even now as early Stone Cold, what we're used to seeing out of Stone Cold later in his life, you know, it's a protected version of him after his neck injury. So it's been a real thrill to see just what he was able to do in the ring before he broke his neck.
Yeah, I noticed that he definitely flails his body around a lot more pre-injury and sells pretty hard. But, you know, also Stone Cold Steve Austin got to a level where all he needed to do was punch, kick, and stun. And
drink beer.
And drink beer. And good for him that's all he needed. It was an unfortunate injury for sure, but he didn't need much after it.
Yeah, that's a great point too, Joe. He kind of got, it's like the wrestling equivalent of fuck you money. I mean, he did have fuck you money, but he had fuck you clout, where he didn't have to do shit.
Yeah.
Or I think as JR has put it, he was a made man at that point.
Yeah.
Well, Tom goes on in his email to say that Steve Austin's selling an offense was amazing during this Bret Hart feud, and he says, "We mentioned that Steve Austin blew up during the Survivor Series 96 match. I do believe that was me specifically that called out Steve as getting blown up against Bret." Tom says Tom is not so sure. Don't you think that's part of the psychology? Just a thought.
Basically, fuck you, Bartlett.
Yeah, well, Lord fucking Tom. No,
he brought down the scepter.
Well he should, because once I was called out, I couldn't let it go. I had to look into it, because my rationale behind it was that I could have sworn that I had heard Stone Cold stating that, or Bret Hart stating that in a shoot interview somewhere. So I dug into it. I had to find just what was making me think of that. Turns out I'm dead fucking wrong. I couldn't for the life of me find out the exact date and time of release, because why the fuck would anyone want to keep track of that kind of thing? But I was able to find Stone Cold Steve Austin on the Talk is Jericho podcast discussing the 1996 Survivor Series match with Bret Hart. This might be what I was thinking of. Quote, he, as in Bret, was blown up because he'd been at the house healing up, and it was that grueling of a match. Bret Hart is one of the greatest of all time, so the fact that he hadn't done a whole lot of in-ring work, or none really, and had to knock a little bit of ring rust off, he was gassed. And that fits. This is Bret's first big match back after, what was it, a 7-month hiatus, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there you have it, straight from Stone Cold himself. And of course, Wrasslin Raw would be happy to host Bret the Hitman Hart if he'd like to schedule some time to rebuke Austin's description of events. We will make sure and get that penciled in.
It's talking about made guys. You know who else is a made guy is Lord Tom from the UK.
Yeah, patience of a saint, that man.
He brought down the hammer here properly. He heard something that you were spewing was incorrect, and he said, I need to correct my subjects.
Yes. Luckily, you just got corrected and not whacked.
Exactly. I mean, it could have been a lot worse.
He could have called in Sal, old Sal Sincere, to do the job.
Yeah.
Take a visit to your house at night.
Well, Tom wraps it up here saying, I hope they meet at WrestleMania 13. I think they might have a good match. I think you're probably correct in that if they do meet up there, that they would probably have a pretty damn good match.
I don't think that's going to happen, though. Not at WrestleMania.
No. They saved the worst matches for that. Now, in your house in December, on the other hand, I hear that's going to be a barn burner. But let's not dilly-dally around. Let's get to some of those details, get that outlined here. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on December 9th, 1996. This Raw was recorded at the New Haven Coliseum in New Haven, Connecticut, and features Vince McMahon, Jim Ross, and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right, then. Let's get into it. We're going to kick this episode off with the Toddster. First came the betrayal. That was followed by a burial. And then came the rebirth. The Undertaker battles Mankind on USA. And we got a good graphic up showing viewer discretion is advised. Man, oh man. That was foreboding, and it's in all of its glory there. And that's all we've got for introductions. We're going straight into our first match of the night. Psycho Sid defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley by countout in 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Keep in mind here that Psycho Sid is the WWF champion. Hunter Hearst Helmsley is the Intercontinental champion. Neither titles were on the line in this match. I continue to love the pyro that Sid gets. It just looks so fucking badass behind him. And then the fucking gimmick of Helmsley. Such a drastic comparison. Just when we think we're away from it, he's wearing normal suits on commentary. He's back to the cravat frilly bullshit here. Thankfully, Sid did not like the gimmick either. Sid ran out the entryway to get things going early, landing a big boot on Hunter that Hunter sold perfectly. When things get in the ring, the work gets going, and by that I mean Sid appearing to lay it in and Hunter selling the shit out of it. Man, all of it. Sid hit a great-looking military press on Hunter. JR was really trying to get some quality commentary in on this and was doing some excellent storytelling from the booth, but Vince couldn't help but interrupt and steer things away from comparing Sid and Hunter, which is what JR was doing in terms of athleticism, like a good commentator should. Vince wanted to take things back to where the focus should belong, and that's Shawn Michaels. That didn't last too long, though. In the ring, Hunter continued to get the shit beat out of him. A great-looking chokeslam, great-looking powerbomb from Sid. When Sid turns to work the crowd, though, Hunter crawls out of the ring and up the entryway, literally crawling to get away from Sid while the crowd was chanting one more time on the powerbomb. And that crawling is what draws the count-out victory for Sid. They start here with replays of what just happened, and then the show moves on, so we will pause here. This is the go-home show to the pay-per-view, so I understand that we have to make sure Sid looks good going into his championship match with Bret Hart, but did we need to do it at the expense of Hunter Hearst Helmsley? Last week, Hunter was in a match with Mark Marrow and Jake Roberts. This week, he's crawling away from Sid in under 3 minutes. This is our Intercontinental Champion, folks. I'm just really not sure what to think about all of this. Joe, what did you have on it?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I'm a little indifferent on it. I mean, it's nice to see our champion on the go-home show in a match, but yeah, it's at the expense of Hunter Hearst Helmsley. He does the chicken shit heel move because that's what he is. So I guess it makes sense, but it still kind of it makes Helmsley look a little bit weak. I do like, Sid is just great with facial expressions. And I love it when he pauses, like he'll have a guy like set up for the power bomb or, something else. And he just pauses and looks into the crowd, almost asking them like, should I destroy this man right now? And the crowd is just eating it up.
Bloodthirsty.
Yes. And I love seeing that. I think it's hilarious, but I don't know. I mean, you're starting the show with two big names and I'm on board with that, regardless of how it ended.
I agree with you both that they definitely made Hunter come off weak, but I think that is a byproduct of them doing whatever they can to make Sid look as strong as possible. And I thought that Hunter did a great job of doing that. You kind of talked about it a little bit, Bartlett, but man, Hunter sold his ass off in this match. Yeah. I mean, from bell to, before the bell, up on the ramp before the bell started, he was already selling his ass off. I still think it's pretty interesting how week after week we have been bringing up how Sid assaulted this elderly man, Jose Lothario, with the camera, but it doesn't matter. When he comes out, he's bumping fists with the crowd. There's people holding up signs. I mean, they love him.
They were just as happy to see it as we were.
They didn't care. Or were happy about it. Maybe that's what they're bumping his fists for.
Yeah.
But still confused with JR. Another point you brought up, Bartlett, was how great JR was in this match, just, building up Sid like he should. Last week, he's red-ass JR. For this match, he's back to good old JR, and it seems like him and Vince are getting along. So just confusing back and forth with what they're doing with JR. Vince, as you stated, has to come in and gush over Shawn, though. Let's steer the conversation back to Shawn Michaels. But pretty short match, and Hunter crawling out of the ring in a way, it certainly makes him look weak and almost come off as a jobber here. But I think in the end, they're just sacrificing the Intercontinental champ for the heavyweight champ. So they're trying to say the Intercontinental champ isn't even in the same league as the heavyweight champ. I thought the match itself and what Hunter and Sid did here for the crowd was a pretty solid way to start things off.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I've always been a fan of the Intercontinental title. As a secondary title, it's always been top notch above just about everything else. Other promotions, they have things like TV titles or North American titles or what have you. But the IC title has always been a personal favorite of mine. I know that, Joe, to your point, Hunter is a chicken shit heel thing, or chicken shit heel, so he does the chicken shit heel thing here. But at the same time, I want a little more dignity in my IC champion, maybe the next champion, because Hunter did win it by some kind of nefarious means. It's fitting with character, but maybe Farouk or Ahmed Johnson or anybody but Mark Marrow, right? Let's go now to some kind of boiler room, courtesy of Coliseum Home Video. It started out there in Cleveland, but tonight it's going to be finished in a no-holds-barred match between The Undertaker and Mankind. This is a really brief segment, so I will keep it quick here. And I have to give you guys a little bit of a spoiler here at this point in the notes. You do get confirmation later on, but I have to highlight my point here. Joe, what do you make of the fact that we're giving this much match away on Monday Night Raw, but the Executioner is getting a pay-per-view match with The Undertaker next week?
I mean, is it really going to happen? I just, at this point, I hope it doesn't happen. The pay-per-view match, that is.
I couldn't agree more. Just seeing that what we're going to end this Raw with, and then the match that we're going to have at the next pay-per-view, did someone, fuck up and swap the cards or something?
Yeah, please swerve us, bro.
Yeah, little disappointing. But let's take it now to our next match. Goldust with Marlena defeats Bart Gunn by pinfall, 6 minutes and 5 seconds. Marlena looked amazing as always. Great to see her here again. after what feels like forever. And once again, Vince notes the, quote, histrionics of Goldust, end quote. Bart Gunn is still coming out to the Smoking Guns music, and in the non-heel outfit. This was very Westworld, especially later whenever we get Billy. Bart wears the white hat, Billy wears the black hat. I guess Billy Gunn cost Bart the Intercontinental title at Superstars yesterday. Goldust cheats here from the outset, throwing some golden dust into Bart's face while Marlena was distracting the referee, literally within the first 60 seconds of the match. What a terrible referee that was. I don't think it was Earl Hebner, but I'm going to just assume it was. After some domination, Marlena continues the abuse by blowing cigar smoke into Bart's face while he's laying at the outside. I have really come to like that as a brief, momentary attempt at handicapping an opponent. Something about it just kind of feels right. Then Goldust did this. I was struggling to find a way to what to call it. It was almost like a falling punch to Bart. Bart was standing on the floor, leaning on the apron, and Goldust almost kind of like belly flopped down to the mat, but used the momentum to drive a punch into Bart's face, dropping Bart to the ground. I thought that looked great. There was just something that was just very Goldust about it. Tonight, either Jim Ross or Jerry Lawler is going to interview Bret Hart. It was really hard to keep straight which one would be doing it over the course of the episode because they keep going back and forth. At this point, I thought Jerry Lawler was doing the interview, but then it turns out it's Jim Ross. Again, constant arguing about it. I loved the baseball slide into the uppercut from Goldust. I'm always a sucker for that. Then we cut to Billy Gunn backstage, watching the match on a monitor. Billy cut a promo for us there. It was lukewarm. And there was just so much glitter everywhere in the ring, all over Bart Gunn, golden glitter everywhere. It looked like a stripper's dressing room there in the ring. Things got a little sloppy in the corner. Looked like there was some kind of miscommunication. That gives an opportunity for the finish, though, where Bart appears to injure his knee. Goldust capitalizes, rolls up Bart, gets the pin, the victory. But the fun isn't over yet here. Billy Gunn down the entryway to grab a microphone and start berating Bart. Bart's able to get up just after the slapping begins, and Bart lays in some great-looking lefts, causing Billy to fall out of the ring and run away. Bart Gunn has a mean southpaw. Keep that in mind for the future. Bart went limping after him. I think serviceable. And Ryan, I'm so glad you introduced that word to my vocabulary all these years ago now in describing some of these matches. Serviceable is the best way to describe this. It was nice to see Goldust in action again. Same with Bart. But, I wouldn't have changed the channel yet, but I would have started yawning a little bit here. Ryan, what did you think of this?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you and myself here that this was a serviceable match. That is exactly what I was kind of thinking through most of it. Nothing real flashy or fantastic about this match, but overall it was pretty solid. Both of these guys, they worked fairly well together for the most part. Bart, as you pointed out, when he comes down, he has reverted to the pre-heel version of the outfits where Billy got a whole new wardrobe. So I think we see who's getting the push here and who isn't. Unfortunately, I spoke too soon last match. JR is now reverting between good old JR and red ass JR in the middle of an episode because he's back to jackass JR in this match. He's arguing with Vince and the King. We do, towards the middle of this match, we kind of lose focus and we go split screen to talk again about the Mankind Undertaker match coming up. Billy Gunn's kind of poor promo that he cuts backstage while watching. But when we do pay attention, solid entertaining. I definitely agree that I wouldn't have changed the channel here. And I thought it was a pretty decent ending, too, to have Billy go for this high-flying move. Goldust moves out of the way, causing Billy to come down on his knee hard and having Goldust capitalize on it to get the victory. I thought that was some solid in-ring storytelling there. So definitely could have been a better match, but solid all around and definitely serviceable.
Yeah, I think there's good things and bad things here. Like you mentioned, Bartlett, we haven't seen Goldust in forever, so I like the fact that we saw Goldust and Marlena on TV. It's been a very long time. I always love seeing both of them. But I guess one bad thing is they're really forcing us to care about the Billy versus Bart feud. And it's hard to do that, mostly because a lot of it has been on Superstars, but also they didn't give a shit about the tag team division before this breakup, so much that we didn't really care about the tag team division.
So much so that they broke them up.
So it's really hard to really get invested in it. You know what I mean? And it's always a good storyline to have, a tag team breakup and have one guy kind of be the star. It's worked in the past, so they're trying to do it again. But it's hard to care about it because we didn't really care about the tag teams before then because of what they have done to us over the past year and a half with the tag team division and still continue to do. And Billy Gunn is just not a very good heel, in my opinion. Billy Gunn, to me, just comes off as a babyface, and he's just not really doing great heel work. But one thing I want to say about Bart, since he was the one in the match, man, if this guy had any personality or any ounce of charisma, he maybe could have been a star.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, I think he definitely
we know he's like a real life badass, and he's a pretty solid wrestler. He's pretty good in the ring, but he just has zero personality. And we've seen that through this whole like smoking guns turning heel thing that we've seen over the past several months.
Sick of getting screwed.
Yeah, basically. I just want to point out another great line from JR where Bart injured his knee. Instead of just saying the standard, it looks like he injured his knee, JR says, he may have dislodged his kneecap there. I'm just like, that's such a great line. Like that makes it sound so much more serious than just saying, he injured his knee.
And in like a good writer, it gives you a much better visual picture of what could have happened there.
Yeah.
And unlike Vince, JR doesn't always constantly repeat the same key words over and over again. He kind of changes it up quite a bit.
Yeah, the only thing that I want to add on to that is I really liked your point, Joe, about Billy just not working as a heel here. The thing that I noticed in the promo that he gave backstage is, once again, Wrasslin Raw has reached back in time and given people advice that they have taken to heart, because usually what we get is overbearing, obnoxious Billy Gunn. And it just comes off as too much. It's too obnoxious. It's not the right kind of heat, and I don't like it. I don't like it as a heel or as a wrestler or anything that I want to have on my screen. In this case, this episode, Billy was pulling it back. He was toning it down as much as Billy Gunn can, at least, and he was trying to cut like a calmer, more reasoned heel promo, and it still just wasn't working. So hopefully this doesn't last too much longer. Although I do agree, I like the storyline, and I like having Bart get highlighted in singles action. Unfortunately, you're right. The amount of charisma of a cardboard box. Well, let's move it along to let Coliseum Home Video now take us back to the Buried Alive match. It's just some footage from that to get us in the mood. After those replay scenes, we move to a promo from Uncle Zebekiah and Justin Bradshaw. Zebekiah does kind of all right, but then Bradshaw just goes balls deep into the cowboy shit here. I really felt like there was going to be chew flying out of his mouth and hitting the camera. It was cartoony and just overbearing and obnoxious. But then the Karate Fighters tournament segment, the Toddster, was here to give us a replay segment of all the various highlights, and the bad news that's all we'll get tonight. The final Karate Fighter tournament bracket will be next week on Karate Fighter Monday. That being Jerry Lawler versus Sable. We're not spending too much time between matches here, so again, just briefly, Ryan, what did you think of the promo from Zebekiah and Bradshaw, as well as the Toddsters highlight reel and Karate Fighters blue balls this week?
Zebekiah and Bradshaw's promo, all I could think of through it is Bradshaw's extremely fake Southern sounding or over the top Southern accent. It was just terrible. And it's all I could focus on during it. So safe to say, not a great promo. The Karate Fighter tournament, this was probably the biggest disappointment in that we didn't get shown anything. It's just slow motion, dramatic replay of all of the highlights from this tournament with Petting Zoo voicing it all over and them telling us next week we'll get the title win. So that's a little disappointing, but it was the biggest commercial for Karate Fighters. Petting Zoo gives us all of the names of the fighters, as well as laying out all the different weapons that you could have. So this really was a full-on product push here for the Karate Fighters. So I guess this is what they've been paying for the whole time. Was this was the payoff.
Yeah, really disappointing that we didn't get a Karate Fighters match and we went through all of that. When are they going to do it? Next Monday? Is that when he
that's
said?
what it sounded like.
That's what they're claiming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yeah, I guess nonetheless a good commercial for Karate Fighters. So that was nice. And the Bradshaw and Zebekiah thing, like, it just looks like fucking Looney Tunes cartoon shit. And like you guys said, just over the top Southern cowboy shit.
You know what I realized listening to you guys give your comments on this? I'm more excited about Karate Fighters Monday than I am about In Your House, It's Time. I want to see the end of this fucking tournament.
But what about Undertaker versus the Executioner?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I want to see Karate Fighters more. I think.
Sable versus Jerry Law.
You
Karate
think,
Fighters.
Yeah.
You think.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, you don't know.
That's true.
You don't know
That is
yet.
true. I have not seen the upcoming pay-per-view ever, so you could very well be right.
Could be the best pay-per-view we've reviewed yet.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Well, that promo has lubed us up and eased the way for our next match. Jesse James, that's the real Double J, defeats Justin Hawk Bradshaw and Uncle Zebekiah in a 2-on-1 match by pinfall, 5 minutes and 51 seconds. Jesse James was so wrapped up in getting vengeance on these two that he forgot he should be singing the song on his entrance. After he made it damn near to the ring, he had to walk back up and start singing so that he could walk back down again singing. But that was a swerve, bro. I loved it. Joe hit it in our intro there at the top of the show. As Jesse James got to ringside, he dropped the mic to sneak attack Bradshaw and Zebekiah. I hate to say it, but the action looked like shit to me. At the start here, when all three guys were in the ring, it was full of stutter steps and bad timing. While on his hands and knees, Jesse James threw himself out of the ring when Bradshaw touched his head. Just really not good looking work here. That was to set up a spot outside, though. Jesse James had to get a punch in on Zebekiah out there at ringside. Didn't really work all that well. Rather than fighting while the referee was distracted, Bradshaw and Jesse James just stood in the ring and stared at each other. It didn't get better from there. At one point, Jesse James rolled up Zebekiah while the ref's back was turned again. Bradshaw kicks them, and then a second later, the pin breaks, with Jesse selling that kick. The problems seemed to be mainly centered around Jesse James and Zebekiah. Bradshaw was kind of just stuck reacting to things here. But then it was time for the finish. Bradshaw locked Jesse James in a full Nelson. Zebekiah came in with the branding iron to hit Jesse. Jesse ducks. Bradshaw looked like he lost an eye to the branding iron. I don't know if that was just a bad camera angle or what, but it looked like it was straight to the freaking eyeball there. And then Jesse weakly takes control for the pin and the 3 count. But the mediocrity isn't over. In probably the best visual of the match, Bradshaw clotheslines Zebekiah out of revenge, but then ruins it by using the ink stamper branding iron on Zebekiah's arm and trying to act badass about it all. It sounded like he was mooing to the crowd. I mean, I don't know. It's an old recording, and my hearing isn't as good as it used to be, but it really sounded like mooing to me.
Bringing back Mantar.
Yeah. Moo. This match is where I would have changed the channel. Joe, was it just me, or was this the drizzling shits in every possible way?
It's not just you. Certainly is not. This is just real goofy, hokey shit. I mean, we've got this farmer cowboy with a Yosemite Sam looking manager, and we have a country lounge singer. I mean, it's just really bad stuff. And Bradshaw beats up Zebekiah, and Zebekiah is Dutch Mantel. And I was thinking, like, immediately when that happened, I'm like, okay, Dutch is getting fired, obviously, like, right? Like, that has to be what's happening.
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and the answer to that is yes. He was fired in December from WWF. So,
okay.
And yeah, we basically saw it on TV. And it wasn't really that exciting.
Yeah.
We're going to be 3 for 3 on this being the drizzling shits. This was not good. The beginning is extremely hectic when they're all three in the ring, and for some reason, this ref, I don't know if he's getting pointers from Earl Hebner, but he was not able to get anything under control, and it took a good few minutes before finally we get it down to just 2 people in the ring, because as Vince reminds us, this is a handicap match, not a 2-on-1 match. So the ref finally gets that straight, and we're down to just 2 in the ring, but it doesn't get much better, especially anytime Zebekiah is in there working with Double J. It just doesn't look good. The end with Zebekiah accidentally hitting and costing Bradshaw the match. Does anyone give a shit? I mean, who the fuck cares? He turns on Zebekiah again like anyone cares, and then he does this branding. I hope once he's alone and no longer has a manager, they will put this stupid branding iron thing to the side, because when they show his arm and you could see the runny streaking smear of the branding iron, it really highlights what a piece of garbage prop this is and just how shitty this stupid thing is. So bad match, bad gimmick, and bad branding iron.
I wonder, because, Dutch Mantel, Uncle Zebekiah, he is a very experienced, seasoned person in the ring here. And I wonder if they were thinking that with him in there kind of leading and directing things, that they could make more of it than it ended up being. Because really, I'm left sitting here thinking that maybe Jesse James is a little too green to be able to handle 2 opponents in a match. And all, the spot calling it in the ring that they were probably doing. I don't know.
Maybe.
He's still so new, but he's automatically just thrown into this match. And Zebekiah just wasn't good enough to walk him through it, I guess. Backstage now, we get a glimpse of Bret Hart in a denim jacket before breaking to commercial. We came back to a Sega Saturn commercial and Jim Ross in the ring to introduce Bret the Hitman Hart. I have a rhetorical question for anybody out there. How the hell does someone look so damn cool while wearing a denim jacket with their own likeness airbrushed on the back of it?
That's that one they were trying to sell us not long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good product placement here, having someone badass like him push it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you have to be Canadian to pull it off, but
it is a Canadian tuxedo.
Yeah. When asked for his thoughts on the upcoming match against Psycho Sid, Bret and Jim would rather talk about the past couple weeks involving Bret, the Bulldog, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the interplay between them all. But finally, they get back to the match at hand. Jim says, "Quite frankly, Bret, Psycho Sid almost chokeslammed the life out of you." Finally, Bret gets into a solid promo going after Psycho Sid, lays it all out for us. Said a few things here, but I most especially loved the line, "Sid, when you snap, people call you Psycho, but when I snap, people are going to call me champion." Great fucking line there. Bret guarantees that Sid will be Oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to try to read this. Bret guarantees that Sid will be excellently executed, which can only mean that it will not be the executioner executing the excellence.
Bret is going to jam a camera into Sid's chest,
causing full cardiac arrest,
which will result in a balloon.
A balloon implant. into the heart.
Does that mean the balloon puffs up to make the heart pump, or?
Ask Jose. He had to have one put in.
I'm assuming he was talking about, what is that, angioplast, I think they call it?
Yeah. Well, you know what? We'll schedule some time for Jose to come on the show.
Yeah,
sure.
I have a feeling Jose may no longer be with us at this point. I don't know that for sure, but
well, he did take a camera to the heart, inducing full cardiac arrest. Of course, he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
That was, what'd you say? It was, Ryan, you said it was Weekend at Bernie's.
He died in 2018. November 6th, 2018 is when he died. So
they kept the Weekend at Bernie's sham going for another 15 years.
Longer than 15, more like 20 years.
Yeah. 20 years after Vince McMahon killed him.
Yes.
Called his time of death on air.
Yeah.
After that, we had the acclaimed slam of the week, that being Flash Funk doing the 360 leg drop. And that's it for this segment. Before we move on to the main event, I have to ask, Joe, what did you think about Brett's in-ring interview with Jim Ross and the flashy, funky slam of the week?
Well, the Bret Hart interview is extremely short. There really wasn't much to it, but Bret makes it very clear that he wants the world title back, and that is the most important thing to him. And that is extremely believable because we know that how important that title was to Bret Hart in real life. So, yeah, just a good interview that came off very believable. Flash Funk, it's very appropriate to use Flash Funk for a video game slam of the week because Flash Funk is kind of like a video game wrestler.
I enjoyed the brief interview here with Bret Hart. I thought he did a pretty good babyface promo here on Sid. But one of my favorite lines was when they were watching the footage of over the last month of Stone Cold attacking the Hitman. And when we go back and show the footage when Stone Cold's trying to break Bret Hart's leg, JR refers to it as pillanizing his leg. And I thought that was just a great term that JR used there for it. The In Your House video game slam of the week, we saw that finisher last week, looked good, still look good here, and I still don't remember this video game.
Yeah, right? It was even on Sega Saturn.
Yeah, and DOS. MS-DOS. Yeah. It was on MS-DOS. What the fuck?
Yeah. Well, let's go now into our main event. The Undertaker defeats Mankind with Paul Bearer in a no-holds-barred match in 10 minutes and 21 seconds. We started this off with a view of Mankind out in the desert in Dubai. Mankind was sitting in a dune, repeating that he wanted to go home while dumping sand on himself. I guess there was a Middle East tour that they were on. They took that footage from. Then we cut to two jackasses going through the locker room acting like super fans. I was not sure what the fuck the deal with this was, but it was terrible. I'm pretty sure Vince named them. I didn't catch the names.
Would you like some information on that? Because I thought the same thing. I'm like, I gotta look this up.
Please.
So Vince refers to them as Adam and George. And I thought to myself, this has to be like, they have to be from some like shitty TV show or like something. Who are these guys? Apparently, these guys were just super fans who got a big break.
Oh.
And the WWF seemed to want to hire them to do commercials between 96 and 98.
Wow.
So
Jesus.
We're going to be seeing more of Adam and George in the future here.
Okay.
Oh, man. I'm not sure what I think about that.
I'm indifferent.
I mean, there's super fans that got a big break.
Yeah,
I mean,
and these commercial wasn't terrible.
Yeah. I mean, good for them, I suppose. But if we're going to have kind of like no names on here, I think I'd rather have Barry Dudensky.
Not no names. Vince gave their names.
Right.
like I said at the outset here, they got me with this because, for example, one of the jackass things they do is they pick up a large pair of shoes and say, these shoes are huge. I bet they're Yokozuna's shoes. Do you know what he does in those shoes? And I immediately got pissed off because following these statements, they show footage of Yokozuna in the ring not wearing shoes because he's always been fucking barefoot for years now. But then the other guy reminds the first guy of that, and just what a terrible flat segment. And then footage from the last time The Undertaker and Mankind met, leading into the entrance from The Undertaker. JR clarifies that this is no DQ, no count out. There must be a winner here. The Undertaker doesn't waste time as he goes into the rope walk, then the choke slam, and attempts to set up the tombstone when the Executioner comes ambling down to the ring. The Executioner doesn't make it past the second rope. Taker punches him, and he falls off the apron and walks away, with Taker and Mankind following. We cut to commercial there and come back to Taker and Mankind at the outside. There's a decent spot where Undertaker drops the ring stairs on the mandible claw hand of Mankind and that forearm there too. We get the formal announcement here that The Undertaker will be taking on the Executioner in what they're calling an Armageddon match. They go on to list the stipulations of the Armageddon match, but it kind of just sounded like they're renaming a Last Man Standing match. Please, either of you correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what it sounded like.
That's what it came off to me as, yeah.
I loved it when Mankind threw a ring attendant out of the way to set up The Undertaker's leg in a chair by commentary. That looked great. I also loved it when Mankind got kicked from the apron back into the guardrail. That looked stiff as hell, and I'm pretty sure he cracked the back of his head off of that top crossbeam there. I loved The Undertaker body slamming Mankind onto the Spanish announce table. And then, for some reason, Paul Bearer was distracting the ref when Mankind brought the chair into the ring. I didn't get that.
In a no-holds-barred match.
Yeah. And you could tell he was doing it on purpose because he was given the exaggerated, cross-ring looks to make sure that, he still had the chair and he needed to keep on distracting. The mandible claw got applied, and I honestly didn't care for it. It really just looked like Taker was deep-throating Mankind's fingers while giving sultry eyes to the hard camera. The Undertaker managed to spit out Mankind's fingers and reversed Mankind into a tombstone, which got Taker the pin and the 3 count. But then, in an incredibly predictable turn of events, the Executioner shows up to apply the Asian spike, or as JR called it here, the Asiatic spike. Earl Hebner was completely useless in his inability to stop this from happening. He just stood there and tapped the Executioner on the shoulder to try to get him to release it. Didn't do much besides that. And we got one final look at the Undertaker as we faded to black. Guys, I hate to say it, I think I might be getting a little burnt out on Undertaker and Mankind here. This match had some really, really nice spots in it. There were points in it where I was very entertained. There's nothing that can be taken away from the work itself, but this comes back to storytelling. The way the Executioner interacted in this match, the way that this match was more or less a way to prop up an upcoming match between the Undertaker and the Executioner at the pay-per-view. This just did not feel special to me at all, like the rest of Taker and Mankind's matches have felt. And I said it earlier, I'll say it again here. I am not excited or looking forward to the pay-per-view match against the Executioner or the pay-per-view in general. Ryan, please, what did you think about this match and the way that Raw ended tonight?
I'm going to agree with you for the most part in the fact that it feels like they're going to the well too many times with the Undertaker Mankind here. There's nothing bad about this match. These two guys still look great together, but some of the stuff they do, it's going to be the same thing every time they wrestle, some of it. And when you see it just back to back to back, it gets repetitive a little bit. And again, nothing to take away from the stuff that these guys did because they looked great in wrestling with each other. The brutal moves that they were doing with each other. The time where the Undertaker smashes Mankind's hand with the stairs, that looked like he smashed his fucking hand. I don't know how else to put it. But again, this was a Raw match. This wasn't a pay-per-view match, so it was a little bit condensed as well. So there were things that hurt it a little bit. But I still thought the guys did a really good job with each other. When we first come down to the ring, this is only, I think, the second time that we got to see the Undertaker's new ring gear. And I did get a little bit of a laugh because in the front row, we see a bunch of kids and adults all pointing to their Undertaker shirts, indicating that they're clearly cheering for the Undertaker in this one. But I think to myself, all of these shirts are the old Undertaker. You need to update that gear with some new Undertaker look. A good way to sell some new shirts here. I do agree, Bartlett. I love this Undertaker look. It was time to switch it up. The purple accented Undertaker with the hat will probably always be my all-time favorite, but this one is really good. There's a point where the Executioner comes down before the end of the match, because early on, the Undertaker looks like he's going to win this one quickly. Gets a choke slam on Mankind. He's going to go for the tombstone and put it away. And then the Executioner comes down, and then Undertaker punches him once, and then he runs away like the fucking pathetic fuck that he is. I mean, what the hell was that even about? Why even have someone try and interrupt a match if you're just going to have them tuck tail and fucking run after punched one time in the face? And unfortunately, that's going to bring us right back to the end where he comes back out and applies his weak, pathetic-looking finisher on The Undertaker after The Undertaker wins this match. And as you stated correctly, it did nothing to build me up for this In Your House match. I would have been thrilled if I was in the crowd watching this match, but as far as what it's actually doing and setting up for the upcoming pay-per-view is not that much, unfortunately, with two of my all-time favorites here in the ring.
Yeah, I thought this was the shits, and not because of me being tired of Mankind versus Undertaker, but mostly because of what they're using this for. They are using this for poor storytelling to set us up for Undertaker versus the Executioner, which we have found out, like, this guy, I know it's Terry Gordy and he's done some great things in wrestling, but we have seen him on TV enough to know that it's not good. Mm-hmm. And so why are we still going with it? Like, they could have changed it up, but they didn't. They're going with it, and they're now using Mankind and Undertaker as a storyline to get there. There was too much bad in this match for me to, I guess, defend these two guys. There was some good stuff, like when they were on the announce table. The stuff by the Spanish announce table was good, but and the chair or the spot with the stairs that you talked about, Ryan, that was pretty good. But Bartlett, you mentioned the stuff with Earl Hebner being distracted by Paul Bearer. Like, to me, that made no sense. The mandible claw was basically utilized as a rest hold here. Yeah. In this match, and the Undertaker came back from it
without kicking anyone in the balls.
Yeah, without kicking anyone in the balls. Like, he just like got out of it. I don't know how. Nobody knows how. But the Executioner is able to take him out with his pathetic Asian spike move. So one question I wanted to ask you guys, because I can't remember. We're going to watch it again, obviously, because it's a candidate. But how did Shawn Michaels counter the mandible claw? Do you guys remember? I remember it being good.
Yeah.
I guess my point there is, if they're going to do the mandible claw, they should do some sort of counter and not just, the Undertaker just gets out of it.
Right. Yeah.
Or just don't do the mandible claw at all. The mandible claw is one of those moves that needs to be protected, and it just wasn't here. And that's, that could be just nitpicking dickbag, but these guys are fucking superstars, so I expect better.
Well, and unfortunately, I think the explanation as to why he kicked out of it goes back to the last pay-per-view match they had, in that the Undertaker broke the mandible claw hand with the stairs earlier on. But again, it's just going back to that same well again. It's the exact same story as it was in the last pay-per-view,
Yeah.
I think the story behind Undertaker breaking the claw this time is because Mankind's hand was so injured, Mankind was unable to fully lock in and apply the claw.
That was the same story at the last pay-per-view. The Undertaker was like stomping on his hand, and that was why he was able to counter at that time as well.
Right. Right. I was just addressing why there wasn't something like a kick in the balls to get out of it.
Yeah.
Something nice and straightforward like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if you're going to do that, maybe Mankind should have a more difficult time getting that hold on the Undertaker if his hand is really injured. And yeah, another thing real quick, and Ryan, you already mentioned it, but JR says, wait a minute, here comes the Executioner. And I'm just thinking like, oh God, why? And then, yeah, he just like punches him and he's gone. He's gone. Pathetic.
I think I'm going to climb into the ring now. Punch. Maybe not. I'm going to go home.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Oh, man. I didn't like the fact that I was not happy with an Undertaker Mankind match overall. Just
makes you hate the Executioner even more.
Yeah. But you know what else it does, though? It makes me think of, and I hate to always keep going back to this, but it makes me think of one of those common lines that the old school wrestling pros talk about in some of the shoot podcasts out there about how you have to save things and keep them special. We've had one form or another of extreme gimmick match between these two for months now. And they, up until now, they've all been good, but you know, this is the exception that proves the rule, I feel. Now it's getting a bit old.
Well, here they said you've got 10 minutes, and the main point of this is to put over this horrendous Executioner match at, what the fuck's the name of the In Your House?
It's Time.
It's Time, yeah. Shouldn't that really tell us how bad this is going to be? It's named after a fucking injured wrestler that's been terrible for the last 5 months, and is not even going to be in this pay-per-view, and it's named after him.
Yeah, it goes back to like that. Sometimes Vince McMahon just sticks to his guns when he should not.
Yeah.
And change the fucking name of the pay-per-view. Get the Executioner out of there. Do something else with the Undertaker. But no, he sticks to his guns and does this stupid shit.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation we had a couple weeks ago. We were talking about the whole Mankind Undertaker thing in comparison with Undertaker and Yokozuna. Undertaker and Yokozuna had a great feud, but it was stretched out. You had months between matches. Here, we've been having matches every month for a few months now, and it's no longer about the feud. The feud is now being used to prop up other stories, and it's jumped the shark.
Well, it's like, you know, they finally found a wrestler that can believably threaten the Undertaker, and they can't get off of it. They just are stuck on it.
Yeah. All right. Well, as I said, that's the end of our episode here. So let's take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Joe, why don't you go first?
Well, I actually have a couple questions for you guys before I give my highlights and lowlights.
Yeah.
First off, there was a graphic content warning before this episode, and I have no idea why. Did you guys catch any blood or anything? Or
Not at all.
Okay.
Goldust? Maybe for Goldust?
I mean, I don't know. He didn't do anything crazy.
I know, but I'm just thinking of the 90s, you know?
He's bizarre.
Yeah.
Maybe Peacock did some editing and we never saw whatever it was. But my other question is, do you guys have any fucking clue what other matches are on this upcoming pay-per-view other than Bret Hart versus Sid and Executioner versus Undertaker? What else am I missing?
Don't forget, we have a tag team championship match with Fake Razor and Fake Diesel taking on the Bulldog.
That's right.
How could you forget that?
Making me even more excited for its
Who
time.
the fuck is going to pay for that event?
Not me.
I'll tell you who. I'm going to pull out my old The Scrambler box and I'm going to watch it for free.
I don't even know if I would do that.
Yeah,
honestly.
I don't know if I'd want to burn the gas driving over to your house.
Anyway, my highlight, I guess I'm going to go with the return of Goldust and Marlena. I thought it was great to see them back. My low light is the Justin Hawk Bradshaw versus Jesse James match. It was the shits.
So my highlight is I'm going to just go with the buildup of Sid. I thought Hunter especially did a good job of putting Sid over and in general putting Sid over for his upcoming pay-per-view. I thought they did a good job of that. The low light, and I really, really hope this is the last fucking time I need to do this, but the low light is the executioner, and everything involved with him ruining a great feud between The Undertaker and Mankind and turning it into nothing but a tool for his stupid match. Just please be gone, you fucking low light piece of shit, the executioner.
My God. My highlight, we all went different on highlights this week. My highlight ended up being Bret Hart's promo. Short, sweet, to the point, well delivered. In my opinion, the best thing in this whole episode. My lowlight is the fact that it was hard to find a highlight. This was a really poor episode.
Not as bad as last week.
I don't know, man. Maybe it's exacerbated by the fact that this is a go home episode.
It could be.
I am not inclined to buy this pay-per-view at all.
Oh,
and this episode did nothing to change that. I would have changed the channel. If we're being real here, I would have changed the channel at Jesse James and Bradshaw. I would have never seen the Undertaker Mankind match.
I think they crippled themselves here with these. So these are 4 New Haven, Connecticut shows.
Yeah.
That we just saw. And so remember before this, they were starting to do the live angles, kind of throw them in. Well, these guys were in London and Dubai and wherever else. So maybe I think they were kind of crippled by the fact that they couldn't really throw any of those live angles in like they've been doing in these 4 New Haven shows, which kind of hurt the shows a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
And some of the matches hurt the show.
Yeah.
Especially considering we heard what was that last week that they had to redo some matches.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? It was Mero versus Billy Gunn had to be ran twice.
Go back out.
Yeah.
My God, no wonder the audience was dead.
Do it again.
Joseph, do you have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around December 9th, 1996 for us?
Yes, I do. And because things are so shitty in the WWF right now, Dave Meltzer says that in an attempt to fill the 71,000 seats at the Alamo Dome for the Royal Rumble in January, the WWF has decided to combine with AAA to put together 2 shows in one. This is not the AAA that you would call for roadside assistance.
The Mexican.
This is the Lucha Libre promotion out of Mexico. And the idea is to make the event a joint show with So it's going to be a joint show, but most of the AAA matches are not going to air on the actual pay-per-view. So that's pretty terrible. But they got to fill seats, guys. They got to fill them up.
I thought you were going to say that they were going to fill the seats with the life-size cardboard cutouts that they tried to sell to us before.
I mean, they might want to. 71,000?
That's a lot
of seats for this kind of garbage that they've been selling us recently. Speaking of garbage, Dave Meltzer noted during house shows that Shawn Michaels is getting more boos from the crowd, particularly during a Shawn Must Pose post-match routine in Scranton, Pennsylvania. They were booing and throwing trash in the ring.
Oh.
Good. Love to hear my fellow countrymen of Pennsylvania sticking it to the pretty boy.
Well, we will end there then, on a good note. That is all.
I have to ask, then, was there a bad note?
What do you mean?
You said we'll end it on a good note. Were you cutting it short there?
No, that's all. We're done.
Okay, good.
Wrap it up.
It's time.
It's time.
And with that, Joe, you gave a better lead in to this pay-per-view than what they gave us.
That's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us like Tom did at WRASSLINRAW. Just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know how much cooler they would be if they became Rawheads like you and me. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on, next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at In Your House 12.
How dare you try to skip this event?
How could you forget?
It's time. That's why. It's time. We're going to take a look at In Your House 12. It's time, with matches featuring Leif Cassidy, Mark Marrow,
no,
and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.